I should have married him. That's what everyone would say after they saw me running barefoot through Midtown Manhattan in a wedding dress worth $12,000. The rain hammered against my skin so hard it felt personal, turning the silk heavy around my legs as I pushed through crowds of strangers under flickering streetlights. My lungs burned. My mascara stung my eyes. Somewhere behind me, church bells were still ringing for a wedding that no longer had a bride. Claire. Ethan's voice echoed from half a block away, sharp with humiliation instead of heartbreak. That was the moment I knew I'd made the right decision. Because a man in love would have chased me with fear. Ethan chased me with anger. I nearly slipped crossing Lexington Avenue, my bare feet slamming against wet pavement as taxis sprayed dirty rainwater onto the sidewalk. My veil had disappeared 3 blocks ago. One heel was gone. The other still dangled from my hand like evidence from a crime scene. People stared. Some pulled out phones. Somewhere tomorrow, I'd probably become another viral clip online. Runaway bride loses mind in Manhattan. But none of them knew what I'd heard 20 minutes earlier behind the cathedral doors. She looks perfect on my arm. Ethan's voice. Calm. Amused. That's all this marriage needs to be. I'd stood frozen outside the groom's room while his friends laughed quietly around him. Like I wasn't a person. Like I was another expensive watch he planned to wear until he got bored. Thunder cracked overhead. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself and kept running. I didn't know where I was going anymore. Only that I couldn't go back. Not to the church. Not to the cameras. Not to the life everyone had already planned for me. My chest tightened as another black SUV slowed beside the curb near me. For one terrifying second, I thought Ethan had found me. But this vehicle was different. Longer. Darker. The windows tinted so black they reflected the city lights like mirrors. It moved slowly beside me through the rain before stopping completely. The rear passenger door opened. No driver stepped out. No words at first. Just silence. Then a man's voice. Deep. Controlled. Get in. I stopped breathing for a second. The man inside wore a black suit so perfectly tailored it looked carved onto him. Dark hair brushed back neatly. One hand resting against the leather seat. A silver watch catching the glow from the streetlights outside. He looked calm in a way dangerous men usually do. Like chaos never touched them. His pale gray eyes studied me carefully from inside the SUV. Not my dress. Not my body. Me. And somehow that felt more unsettling. I don't even know you, I whispered. Rain dripped from my chin onto the sidewalk. He glanced briefly toward the intersection behind me where voices echoed in the distance. Ethan's security team probably searching nearby already. Then his eyes returned to mine. That's probably why this will work. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? A slow smirk touched the corner of his mouth. Not warm. Not cruel either. Worse. Certain. It means, he said softly, I needed a wife tonight. Then lightning flashed across the city skyline behind him, and for the first time in my life, I stepped willingly into the car of a man everyone else would have feared. The door closed beside me with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than the thunder outside. Warm air wrapped around my soaked skin immediately, carrying the scent of leather, cedar, and something darker I could not place. Expensive. Controlled. Dangerous. I sat frozen against the cream-colored seat while Manhattan blurred past the tinted windows in streaks of gold and rain. Nobody inside the SUV spoke. The driver stared straight ahead. The man beside him wore an earpiece and a charcoal suit that pulled tight across his shoulders whenever he moved. Even the silence felt organized. I tightened my grip on the ruined heel still hanging from my fingers. You can stop the car, I said finally, trying to steady my voice. I just needed to get away from the church. The man beside me did not answer immediately. He watched the city through the window like he owned pieces of it. Maybe he did. No, he said calmly. You needed to disappear. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. Mid-30s maybe. Sharp jawline. Black hair touched slightly silver. Near the temples under the passing streetlights. Every detail about him felt deliberate, from the cuff links on his sleeves to the quiet confidence in the way he sat. Men like Ethan spent their entire lives trying to look powerful. This man did not try. That was what unsettled me most. Who are you? I asked. His eyes shifted toward me slowly. Pale gray. Cold enough to stop a heartbeat. Damien DeLuca. The name hit me instantly. Even if people pretended not to know it publicly, everyone in New York had heard whispers. Real estate. Nightclubs. Shipping companies. Political donations. And behind all of it, rumors no newspaper ever printed twice. My stomach tightened. You are kidding. One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. I rarely do that. I stared at the rain sliding down the glass. I should get out. You should not. His tone never changed. That somehow made him more intimidating. I looked toward the door handle anyway. The guard in the front passenger seat noticed through the mirror. So did Damien. Claire, he said quietly, and hearing my name in his voice sent a chill across my skin. If your fiancé finds you before I drop you somewhere safe, tonight becomes very different for you. How do you know my name? I whispered. He glanced toward the television screen built into the divider across from us. Local news footage already filled the screen. Helicopter shots of St. Bartholomew Cathedral. Reporters standing outside in the storm. A photograph of me smiling beside Ethan during our engagement party flashed across the screen with the words "Runaway Bride" across the bottom. My face burned instantly. Wonderful, I muttered. Damien watched the broadcast without emotion. You disappeared from one of the most expensive weddings in Manhattan history. People notice things like that. I folded my arms tightly across myself. Take me to a hotel. No, you cannot just decide that for me. Actually, he said softly, I can decide quite a lot. The SUV slowed at a red light. Outside, two men on the sidewalk noticed the vehicle immediately. Their expressions changed the second they recognized who sat inside. One stepped backward without even realizing he had done it. Fear. Genuine fear. I saw it clearly. Damien noticed me watching them. Now you understand the problem, he said. People know my face. Which means they will not touch you while you are with me. Why would anyone want to touch me? I asked. His eyes settled on the diamond engagement ring still trembling on my finger. Because by midnight, he said calmly, every powerful family in this city will know you embarrassed a man who does not forgive humiliation. I swallowed hard. Then Damien looked at me again, slow and unreadable, before adjusting the cuff of his black suit jacket. Fortunately for you, he murmured, I need a wife more than he needs revenge. The SUV left Manhattan 20 minutes later, crossing rain-slicked bridges while the city skyline faded behind us in cold silver reflections. I kept watching the buildings disappear through the tinted window like I was watching my old life drown in slow motion. My wedding dress clung to my skin uncomfortably now, the soaked fabric heavy around my legs. Somewhere around mile 15, the driver handed me a folded black towel without turning around. I hesitated before taking it. Thank you, I murmured automatically. Nobody answered. Damien sat beside me scrolling through messages on his phone, calm while my entire world collapsed by the minute. His screen lit the sharp angles of his face every few seconds. Names. Numbers. Security alerts. Headlines already spreading online. Runaway bride disappears. Financier Ethan Whitmore refuses comment. My stomach twisted harder with every glimpse. You still have not explained what you meant, I said quietly. About needing a wife. Damien locked his phone and finally looked at me again. Because I do. That is not an explanation. It is enough for now. Irritation sparked through my exhaustion. Do you always talk like you are threatening people? Only when they are refusing to listen. The SUV slowed as massive iron gates appeared ahead through the storm. They opened before we even stopped. Beyond them stretched a long private drive lined with black trees and security lights glowing softly in the rain. My chest tightened again when I saw the estate at the end of it. It did not look like a home. It looked like power built out of stone and glass. 4 stories tall. White marble columns. Windows glowing warm against the darkness surrounding it. Men in black suits stood near the entrance the second we pulled up. Nobody moved until Damien stepped out first. Then suddenly everyone did. Doors opened. Umbrellas appeared instantly overhead. Voices lowered around him automatically. Fear again. Respect too. I could not tell where one ended and the other began. I stayed frozen inside the SUV for a second too long. Damien looked back at me from the rain. Claire. Just my name. Quiet. Controlled. Somehow impossible to ignore. I stepped out carefully onto the wet driveway, still clutching the towel around my shoulders. Every eye near the entrance shifted toward me for half a second before dropping immediately. Nobody asked questions. Nobody looked surprised Damien had arrived with a runaway bride at almost midnight. That terrified me more than anything else so far. Inside, the mansion felt impossibly silent. White marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers overhead. Somewhere distant, soft piano music played through hidden speakers. A woman in her 60s approached carrying folded clothes and a calm expression that suggested nothing in this house shocked her anymore. Miss Bennet, she said gently. I am Rosa. I prepared a room for you. Prepared? I repeated weakly. Damien removed his watch slowly beside the fireplace. I told them you were coming. I stared at him. You planned this? No, he said calmly. But I adapted quickly. Rosa touched my arm softly. You should warm up before you get sick. I looked between them both. I am not staying here. Damien loosened the cuffs of his shirt without looking at me. You are tonight. You cannot decide that. Actually, he said again, tonight I can. Anger flared hot enough to cut through my fear. I am not one of your employees or your bodyguards or whatever this is. Finally he looked at me directly. Those pale gray eyes settled on mine with terrifying calm. No, he said softly. You are the woman standing between me and a war. The room fell silent around us. Even Rosa lowered her eyes slightly. My heartbeat stumbled. What does that mean? Damien stepped closer slowly, stopping just far enough away not to corner me. It means that within 72 hours, he said quietly, I either marry you or bury what is left of my family. I barely slept. Every sound inside that enormous house kept pulling me awake. Quiet footsteps in distant hallways. Doors opening softly somewhere downstairs. Low voices behind walls thick enough to hide secrets instead of sound. Around 3 in the morning, I finally gave up pretending I could rest and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows inside the bedroom Rosa had prepared for me. Rain still covered the glass in silver streaks. Beyond the estate grounds, black SUVs moved slowly past the gates every few minutes like silent sharks circling dark water. This was not a home. It was a fortress. And somehow I had become part of it overnight. I wrapped the oversized sweater Rosa gave me tighter around myself and glanced at the untouched tea cooling beside the bed. My wedding dress was gone now. Folded away somewhere downstairs. The sight of myself without it should have made me feel relieved. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. Like I had stepped out of one life but had not survived long enough to enter another one yet. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Before I could answer, Rosa stepped inside carrying a breakfast tray. "You should eat," she said gently. "Mr. DeLuca asked me to make sure you did." I stared at her. Does he control everything in this house? A tiny smile touched her face. Everything important. That answer somehow made my stomach tighten more. She placed the tray down near the fireplace. Fresh fruit. Coffee. Warm pastries. Everything looked too perfect. Too untouched by normal life. Why is everyone so afraid of him? I asked quietly. Rosa paused for only half a second. Because fear keeps people alive in his world. Then she left before I could ask anything else. I walked downstairs an hour later, following the scent of coffee and the distant sound of voices. The mansion looked even more intimidating in daylight. Marble staircases curved beneath massive chandeliers. Security. Cameras hid discreetly in every corner. Men in suits stood near every entrance pretending not to watch me. But they all did. Every single one of them. I found Damien inside what looked like a private office larger than my old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the storm-gray ocean behind the estate. He stood near a long conference table while three men spoke quietly around him. Maps. Financial reports. Photographs spread across the table in organized rows. The second I stepped into the room, silence dropped instantly. All three men looked at me before lowering their eyes toward Damien. Waiting. Watching. Damien did not even turn around immediately. "Leave us," he said calmly. No one argued. Within seconds, the room emptied completely. The heavy doors closed behind them with a soft click. Damien finally looked at me then. Dark gray dress shirt. Sleeves rolled slightly past his wrists. No jacket this time. Somehow that made him seem more dangerous instead of less. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Not really." He nodded once like he expected that answer. "You will eventually." "I am not staying long enough to eventually do anything." I folded my arms tightly. "I want to leave." Damien walked toward the espresso machine near the windows and poured coffee with slow precision. "No," the calmness in his voice snapped something inside me. "You do not get to keep saying that like it settles things." He handed me a cup anyway. "Drink this. Stop ordering me around. Then stop standing in danger without understanding it." I stared at him. "You still have not explained anything." Damien took a slow sip of coffee before speaking again. 3 days ago my uncle died. His expression never changed. He controlled the DeLuca organization for 27 years. Organization, I repeated carefully. That is a polite word for whatever this is. His eyes flickered briefly with amusement. Probably. He set the cup down. His death created a problem. According to family rules, leadership transfers through marriage. A stable household. Public image. Political alliances. My heartbeat slowed painfully. So this is business. Everything is business at first. And you just picked me because I happened to run into your car. No, his voice lowered slightly. I picked you because when everyone else in your life tried to own you last night, you still ran. I forgot how to breathe for a second. Damien stepped closer slowly, his expression unreadable again. That tells me more about you than any background report ever could. Then he reached past me calmly and locked the office door. The sound of the lock clicking behind me should not have affected me the way it did. It was quiet. Controlled. But suddenly the office felt smaller even though the ceiling stretched nearly 20 feet high. I turned sharply toward the door. Did you just lock me in here? Damien walked past me without urgency, like my reaction had already been calculated hours ago. Yes. That is insane. No, he said calmly. It is precaution. I stared at him in disbelief. You cannot seriously expect me to agree to this. He loosened the cuff of his sleeve slightly before sitting at the far end of the conference table. Every movement he made looked effortless. Disciplined. Like he never wasted energy on panic because panic belonged to other people. Sit down, Claire. Stop talking to me like I work for you. A flicker of something crossed his expression then. Not anger. Amusement maybe. You are the first person in this house who speaks to me that way. Good. I crossed my arms tighter. Maybe somebody should. For a second the corner of his mouth almost moved again. Then his phone buzzed sharply against the table. The atmosphere inside the room changed instantly. Damien answered without taking his eyes off me. What happened? Silence. Then his jaw tightened almost invisibly. Where? Another pause. No. Do not respond yet. His voice lowered colder with every word. I said wait for my call. He ended the conversation and stared at the dark screen for half a second too long. Something in his face shifted then. Tiny. Barely visible. But enough for me to notice. Exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion. Something heavier. Older. He rubbed a hand slowly across the back of his neck before speaking again. You should eat something. I blinked. That is what you say after. Whatever that call was. It is what I say because you have not eaten since yesterday morning. The fact that he noticed irritated me more than it should have. Why do you care? Damien stood again, walking toward the windows overlooking the ocean cliffs behind the estate. Gray waves crashed violently below. Because dead weight is inconvenient. That is not funny. It was not intended to be. I should have hated him. Honestly, I tried. Every instinct inside me screamed that this man represented everything dangerous and controlling and impossible. But there was something confusing about him too. He never raised his voice. Never grabbed me. Never acted out of control. Men like Ethan needed dominance to feel powerful. Damien carried power like it had already fused into his bones years ago. The silence stretched between us until I noticed something unusual near the bookshelf across the office. A framed photograph. The only personal item in the entire room. A woman sat beside a younger Damien on a stone bench overlooking water somewhere sunny and bright. She looked elegant even while laughing. Warm brown eyes. Silver streaks in dark hair. Real happiness. I looked back at him slowly. Your mother. For the first time since meeting him, Damien hesitated. Just slightly. Yes. You look different there. He glanced toward the photograph briefly. That was before she got sick. The room softened around those words somehow. I did not know why. Maybe because grief sounded strange in his voice. Too human for a man everyone else treated like a myth. What happened to her? I asked quietly. Damien stayed silent long enough that I thought he would ignore the question completely. Then finally, cancer. One word. Flat. Controlled. But underneath it, something sharp enough to cut. He walked back toward the table and picked up a folder waiting there. My mother believed family was the only thing power could not replace. He slid the folder toward me carefully. Marriage documents. Legal agreements. My breath caught instantly. Damien, read them. I do not even know you. You know enough. I looked down at the papers with shaking hands. Temporary marriage arrangement. 72 hours. Public appearances required. Security protection guaranteed. My chest tightened harder with every line. Then I reached the final page and froze completely. Because attached beneath the contract was a photograph of Ethan entering a hotel this morning beside a blonde woman wrapped around his arm while reporters circled them outside. Damien watched my expression carefully. "You ran from him before he replaced you publicly," he said quietly. "That was smart." I swallowed painfully. "Why are you helping me?" His gray eyes locked onto mine again. Cold. Intense. Unreadable. "Because," he said softly, "people only survive this world when someone powerful decides they should." I signed nothing that day. Damien did not pressure me again after sliding the contract across the table. Somehow that unsettled me more than threats would have. He simply let the papers sit there between us while rain hammered against the windows overlooking the ocean cliffs. Like he already knew time would corner me eventually. By late afternoon the storm finally weakened, leaving the estate wrapped in cold gray fog. I wandered the mansion alone because staying inside that office another minute felt impossible. Every hallway looked untouched by ordinary life. Museum clean. Controlled. Beautiful in a way that made people uncomfortable instead of relaxed. The only warmth came from the staff. Rosa smiled softly every time she passed me. The younger housekeepers avoided eye contact completely. Everyone moved carefully whenever Damien entered a room. Like gravity shifted around him. I found the kitchen by accident sometime after sunset. Massive marble counters. Copper pans hanging overhead. The scent of garlic and rosemary filling the air. A young assistant chef dropped an entire tray of crystal glasses the second he noticed me standing there. The crash echoed painfully through the room. "I am sorry," he whispered immediately, kneeling to clean the broken pieces with shaking hands. Before I could help, another man stormed into the kitchen wearing a dark suit instead of a chef uniform. "Security. What happened?" The young chef looked pale. "I made a mistake." The guard's expression hardened instantly. "Mr. DeLuca specifically requested those glasses for tonight." Fear flashed across the young man's face so quickly it hurt to watch. "I can replace them." "With what money?" the guard snapped. "You have already cost enough this month." Something sharp twisted inside my chest. Maybe because I recognized that look on the chef's face. The panic of disappointing someone powerful enough to ruin your life with one sentence. "It was an accident," I interrupted. Both men looked at me immediately. The guard straightened slightly. "Miss Bennett, this does not concern you." "Actually it does now." I stepped closer before I could second-guess myself. "They are glasses. Nobody died." The young chef stared at me like I had lost my mind. The guard looked even more uncomfortable. "Mr. DeLuca does not tolerate carelessness." Then maybe Mr. DeLuca should buy plastic cups if everybody in this house is terrified to breathe wrong around him. Silence dropped heavily across the kitchen. Then a familiar voice spoke behind me. "That would ruin the atmosphere." I froze. Damien stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal suit jacket over a black dress shirt, one hand resting casually in his pocket. I had not even heard him arrive. The guard immediately lowered his eyes. "Sir." Damien ignored him completely. His attention stayed on me instead. Calm. Focused. Dangerous. "You are defending him," he said quietly. "Yes." "Why?" I glanced toward the terrified young chef still kneeling beside the broken glass. "Because humiliating people for accidents is cruel." Damien studied me for a long second. Then his eyes shifted toward the guard. "Leave." The man disappeared immediately. Damien looked back toward the chef next. "Miguel." The young man nearly stopped breathing. "Yes, sir." "Go home early tonight." Miguel blinked rapidly. "Sir." "You heard me." "Thank you, sir." He rushed out of the kitchen so fast he nearly collided with the doorway. The second we were alone, I crossed my arms defensively. You enjoy doing that. Doing what? Making people afraid of you. Damien walked slowly toward the counter where broken glass still glittered beneath the lights. Fear keeps order. No, I said quietly. Fear keeps people lonely. His hand stopped moving for half a second. Tiny. Almost invisible. But I noticed. You think you understand this world very quickly. I think everyone in this house walks on eggshells around you. Damien picked up one broken crystal stem carefully between his fingers. Eggshells break easily. People do too. Silence stretched between us again. The ocean crashed faintly somewhere beyond the windows. Damien finally set the crystal piece down before looking at me directly. You should stop challenging me in front of my staff. Why? Because eventually, he said softly, stepping closer until my pulse stumbled again, you are going to discover I let you do it because I want to. I should have stayed away from him after that night in the kitchen. Any smart woman would have. Damien DeLuca was the kind of man people survived by keeping distance from. But the problem with dangerous men was that sometimes they showed softness so quietly it felt more intimate than affection. The next morning I woke to sunlight cutting through the enormous windows of my room for the first time since arriving at the estate. The storm had finally passed. Ocean waves glittered below the cliffs outside while white gulls drifted across the pale blue sky. For a few peaceful seconds, I almost forgot where I was. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. My stomach tightened immediately before I even answered. Claire. Ethan. His voice sounded smooth. Controlled. The exact tone he used whenever reporters stood nearby. How did you get this number? Silence for half a second. Do you really think hiding with DeLuca is going to protect you? Cold spread slowly through my chest. I sat upright instantly. I am not hiding. Then why disappear without a word? I almost laughed at that. You had another woman at your hotel before the wedding reception even ended. That was business. So was I apparently. His exhale sharpened slightly. There it was. The real Ethan underneath the polished smile. You embarrassed me publicly, Claire. Goodbye, Ethan. Listen carefully. His voice dropped lower. You have no idea who you are standing beside. Damien DeLuca destroys everything he touches. Before I could answer, the line disconnected. My hands shook harder than I wanted to admit. Because part of me already knew Ethan was right. Downstairs the estate buzzed with unusual tension. Men moved faster through the halls. Security radios crackled constantly. Two black SUVs tore past the front gates while I stood near the staircase watching silently. Something had changed overnight. Rosa appeared beside me carrying fresh linens. You should stay upstairs today. Why? Her expression tightened carefully. Mr. DeLuca is handling business. Which apparently meant nobody asked questions. Around noon I finally found Damien outside near the ocean terrace behind the mansion. Wind pulled through his dark hair while he stood overlooking the cliffs with one hand in his coat pocket. Two guards waited nearby but far enough away to give the illusion of privacy. Damien turned slightly when he heard my footsteps approach. You should not be outside alone. Your staff says that every 30 minutes. Because they are correct. I folded my arms against the cold wind. Ethan called me. Something dangerous flickered behind his eyes instantly. Not loud. Not dramatic. Worse. Controlled anger. What did he say? That you destroy everything you touch. Damien looked back toward the ocean again. Sometimes. The honesty of that answer caught me off guard. Most people would deny it. Most people lie professionally. Wind whipped strands of hair across my face. Why does it feel like your entire house is preparing for something? Silence stretched. Then Damien glanced toward the guards standing farther back. Leave us. They obeyed immediately. Of course they did. Damien waited until they disappeared beyond the terrace doors before speaking again. My uncle's death created instability. You said that already. What I did not say, he continued calmly, is that someone inside the organization believes I am unfit to lead. My stomach tightened. Because you are not married. Because power attracts ambition. The ocean crashed violently below us. And because if I fail publicly this week, every alliance protecting my family disappears with me. I stared at him carefully. So this marriage is politics. At first. There was that word again. At first. Like something about this situation had already started changing without my permission. Before I could respond, shouting erupted somewhere near the front entrance of the estate. Raised voices. Running footsteps. Damien turned instantly toward the mansion, every muscle in his body tightening at once. One of the guards sprinted onto the terrace seconds later, breathing hard. Boss. Damien's expression darkened immediately. What happened? The guard swallowed once before answering. Someone breached the outer gate. Everything changed in less than 30 seconds. One moment ocean wind whipped through my hair while Damien stood beside me calm and unreadable. The next, the entire estate moved like a machine thrown into emergency mode. More guards rushed across the terrace carrying radios. Black SUVs accelerated across the circular driveway below. Somewhere inside the mansion, alarms echoed once before cutting off abruptly. Damien's expression hardened instantly into something colder than I had seen before. Focused. Precise. Dangerous. Where? He asked the guard. North entrance checkpoint. How many? Only one vehicle made it through before security stopped it. Damien nodded once sharply. Get Luca downstairs now. Double perimeter coverage. The guard disappeared immediately. I stepped closer before I could stop myself. What is happening? Damien turned toward me fully for the first time since the interruption. You are going upstairs. No, his jaw tightened slightly. Claire. Stop deciding things for me. Fear buzzed painfully beneath my ribs now, but anger burned hotter. You do not get to lock me away every time something goes wrong. The wind carried silence between us for half a second. Then Damien walked closer slowly until his shadow blocked the sunlight across the terrace floor. This is not an argument, he said quietly. Someone crossed my gates without permission. That does not mean I need protection every second. Yes, he said calmly. It does. Before I could answer, another voice interrupted from behind. Us. Boss. I turned sharply. A younger man stood near the terrace doors, maybe 23 or 24. Dark hair. Same gray eyes as Damien. Same sharp jawline too, only softer somehow. Less hardened by whatever this world had done to him. He looked terrified. Damien's entire posture shifted the second he saw him. Not softer exactly. But protective. Immediate. Luca, Damien said. You should be inside. I heard the alarms. Luca's eyes flickered toward me briefly before returning to his brother. Was it Russo? Damien did not answer immediately. Which apparently was answer enough. Luca cursed quietly under his breath. This is getting worse. Damien stepped forward slightly, placing himself between Luca and the terrace edge without seeming to realize he had done it. Instinct. Pure instinct. Go back inside. Luca's expression tightened. You cannot keep shielding me forever. Watch me. The sharpness in Damien's voice silenced him instantly. I stared between them both carefully. Suddenly pieces clicked together inside my head. 72 hours. Family leadership. Protection. Your brother, I said slowly. Damien glanced toward me once. Yes. This is about protecting him too. Luca looked confused immediately. You told her. Enough. Damien's attention shifted back toward the estate grounds below where security teams moved rapidly near the outer gates. Until this situation stabilizes, nobody leaves the house. That includes your future wife? Luca asked quietly. Future wife. Hearing those words out loud sent something strange through my chest. Damien ignored the comment completely. Especially her. Luca looked at me again then. Really looked this time. You should listen to him, he said quietly. People underestimate my brother because he stays calm. That is usually when things are worst. The younger guard from earlier suddenly reappeared on the terrace breathing hard again. Boss. Damien turned immediately. What now? The driver is refusing to speak to security. Who is it? The guard hesitated. A woman. Confusion flickered across Damien's face for the first time since I met him. What woman? She says she came to warn Miss Bennet. Cold spread instantly through my chest. Warn me about what? The guard swallowed carefully before answering. She says Ethan Whitmore made a deal with the Russo family after you disappeared. The ocean wind suddenly felt freezing against my skin. Damien's expression darkened slowly beside me while his gray eyes locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. Then he said the one thing that made my heartbeat stop completely. Claire, he said quietly, I do not think your fiancé ever intended to let you leave that church alive emotionally, socially, or otherwise. You were supposed to belong to him forever. The woman waiting downstairs looked exhausted. Mid-40s maybe. Blonde hair twisted into a loose bun. Expensive coat damp from the ocean fog outside the estate gates. She stood near the fireplace inside the main sitting room while two guards watched her carefully from opposite corners. The second she saw me walking downstairs beside Damien, her face changed completely. Guilt. Relief. Fear. Claire, she breathed. I stopped halfway down the staircase. Marlene. Ethan's assistant. The same woman who had managed every detail of our wedding for the past 6 months. She looked nothing like the polished professional who used to carry color-coded schedules and smile through impossible demands. Tonight she looked terrified. Damien stayed slightly behind me but close enough that I could still feel his presence like pressure against the room itself. Tell her, he said quietly. Marlene swallowed hard. Ethan found out 2 weeks ago that you were planning to leave him. My heartbeat stumbled painfully. What? Your therapist called his office by accident trying to confirm an appointment. Shame burned instantly through me. I had spent months secretly preparing myself to leave that relationship. Quietly. Carefully. He started watching everything after that, Marlene continued softly. Your calls. Your schedule. Your bank activity. Damien's jaw tightened beside me. And Russo? Marlene looked toward him nervously before answering. Ethan approached them after Miss Bennet disappeared from the wedding. He thought if DeLuca security was protecting her, she hesitated. Then maybe she mattered to you already. Silence settled heavily across the room. I looked at Damien slowly. Did I? His gray eyes met mine immediately. Calm. Unreadable. Honest in a way that terrified me more than lies. Yes. The word barely sounded louder than the fire crackling nearby. My chest tightened painfully. How? Damien looked away first, toward the storm-dark windows facing the cliffs outside. 3 years ago, he said quietly, my mother collapsed during a charity gala in Manhattan. Confusion flickered through me. Then suddenly something old and forgotten stirred in the back of my memory. A ballroom. Music. Panic. An older woman struggling to breathe near the staircase while dozens of wealthy guests froze in shock. I had knelt beside her automatically because nobody else moved fast enough. "Wait," I whispered. Damien's voice stayed low. Everyone there cared more about appearances than helping her. The memory sharpened instantly now. I remembered holding the woman's trembling hand while paramedics arrived. Remembered a younger man pushing through the crowd toward us with absolute panic in his eyes. Gray eyes. "That was you," I breathed. Damien looked back at me slowly. "You stayed with her until the ambulance left." My heartbeat turned uneven. I barely remember that night. I do. The room felt strangely quiet after that. Marlene lowered her eyes carefully like she understood she was standing inside something personal now. Damien stepped closer slowly, his voice softer than I had ever heard it before. "When I saw you running through the rain outside the church," he paused briefly. "I recognized you immediately." I stared at him completely speechless. "You already knew who I was?" "Yes." "Then why pretend it was random?" Something almost painful flickered across his face then. "Because I was trying very hard not to become the kind of man who uses fate as an excuse to keep someone." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Outside the mansion windows, the ocean crashed against the cliffs below while evening sunlight finally broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Golden light spilled slowly across the marble floors around us. Damien looked at me carefully like he was waiting for rejection instead of expecting obedience for once. "Claire," he said quietly, "I told you I needed a wife." His gaze held mine completely now. No games. No control. Just truth stripped bare enough to hurt. But somewhere between that church and this house, his voice lowered. "You became the first thing in my life that felt like home." I could not breathe for a second. Because for the first time since stepping into his car, Damien DeLuca no longer looked like the most dangerous man in New York. He looked like the loneliest.